Lost Eons is a no-maths, very narrative-based TTRPG. Instead of trying to track multiple different modifiers, you instead only need to know which dice you're using in any particular skill. To that note, let's go over the core dice mechanics of Lost Eons. Lost Eons uses two particular types of dice that you need to know. One is the soul dice, and the other is your skill dice. Now, Lost Eons uses polyhedrals anywhere between D4s all the way up to D12s. Surprisingly enough, this is not a D20 based system at all. You won't need it. When making a skill check in Lost Eons, you put together a dice pool of only 2 dice. Unless of course you're being assisted, but we'll get to that later. The first of these dice is your soul die. This represents your innate characteristics that you have, unassociated with any particular skill knowledge. The soul die is almost always going to be a d6, unless you've taken damage into your wounded clock, in which it decrements to a d4. We'll talk more about wounded states and whatnot in a separate video. For now, the soul die is almost always going to be a d6. The second of your 2 dice in your dice pool is the skill die. This represents your particular aptitude in that particular skill. This can be anywhere between a d4 to a d12. Your skill die is determined at character creation by which archetype you choose, and then later modified in character creation to be incremented to higher dice depending on various aspects you choose during character creation. Your previous experiences and personality, other traits you may pick up, and of course, mutations. Throughout the course of the game, you may get even more mutations that may allow you to increment skill dice even further. Now that you know which dice you are rolling in your dice pool, it's time to actually roll the dice and see what you get. All tests in Lost Eons, outside of combat, which we'll talk about later, use the same difficulty grade that you need to hit. 1s, 2s, and 3s counts as failures. 4s and 5s represent partial success, and anything 6 or higher is a full success. This means that as your dice increment, your skill dice increment, you have a greater and greater chance to, well, roll higher, to roll more full successes. Normally, you only look at the highest result on either of the 2 dice that you roll. There are 2 different occasions where both dice will be considered, and those are the critical states, critical failure and critical success. A critical failure is when you roll a failure, 1s, 2s, and 3s, while showing a 1 on one of those dice. This means that you will get 2 complications instead of 1, which can add up quickly. A critical success means that you score on both of your dice 6 or higher. This represents doing the job above and beyond what was expected. Now that you've rolled your skill test, it's time to look at what the consequences are for your successes, or more importantly, failures. If you roll a full success, that means whatever you set out to do, you did as intended. It worked. Congratulations. Move on to the next problem you have to face. If you roll a partial success, that means you still accomplish what you were trying to do, but there's some new complication that you have to worry about. If you fail the test completely, well, of course, you don't accomplish what you set out to do, and you also get an additional complication. Because complications arise in any result on a die between 1 and 5, there's usually going to be grounds for keeping the story moving, keeping the tension high, because complications are going to be the norm. You and your player should embrace this. Complications are fun. So what are complications? Complications can be, well, anything that is a detriment to the player, the group, or the situation, though it should be proportional to what they were trying to do and how many complications you get. If a consequence is rolled, use the narrative to inspire what sort of pitfall or complication the character, the party, or the situation entails. If unsure, there are a few guidelines you can follow. An easy fallback is simply to have the character performing the skill test take damage. Another easy fallback is simply that what they were trying to do takes longer than they expected. This could be a narrative concern, or it could contribute to an adventure clock, which we'll talk about in a separate video. These complications could also be something completely narrative, without any immediate mechanical detriment. Perhaps an NPC didn't like what they had to say, and that relationship has now been harmed in some way. Or perhaps the character gets separated from the group and has to, well, deal with getting back to each other. When utilizing various items in Lost Eons, another easy fallback, and one that is usually codified in the rules, is simply that the item breaks or is otherwise used up. Now let's say you've rolled your dice pool, and you rolled a failure, or even worse, a critical failure. You could leave it as is and accept the complications, or you could push your luck. When you decide to push your luck, you, well, get to re-roll the skill. The problem is, the downside is, if you then fail again, you suffer severe consequences. And for GMs, those consequences should indeed be severe. The guidelines for those particular consequences after you push your luck are, well, more severe. So GMs, let's say a player of yours decided to push their luck and still failed. Severe complications should be severe. They should be impactful, and it should be something that the players fear. High risk, high reward. So let's look at that risk. Again, an easy fallback is harm, but in this case, severe harm. This could be multiple segments of their wounded clock, or depending on how big of a situation it is, you could simply drop them immediately into their wounded state. Failure could also represent failure of an objective as a whole. Whatever immediate mission they were on, immediate objective, fails. Or, on the flip side of things, this severe complication could complete an adventure clock representing an enemy's goals. Perhaps this failure means that an enemy escapes or simply accomplishes whatever objective the players were trying to stop them from accomplishing. Just like normal complications, serious complications could simply be narrative, but they should be even more impactful. Some sort of permanent and, well, severe decline in the party's reputation, whether it be from a single individual or from a whole population. Throughout your adventures, you may come across tasks that you need assistance on. When assisting another character in a test, you simply add your soul die to their dice pool. In this way, you are simply lending a hand. You are another person there helping them with whatever they are doing. They're still leading the test, and therefore your particular aptitude in that skill is less important than you simply being there to assist. Now that you understand your soul die, your skill die, the difficulty ranges, and the complications associated with success, and more importantly failure, you have everything you need to know to go out and start your own adventure in the strange new world of Lost Eons. Thank you for watching this bite-sized tutorial. If you enjoy what we're doing here at RPGs Uncovered, consider heading over to our Ko-Fi, where you can find written accounts of these tutorials, as well as other behind-the-scenes information for players and GMs. For a more in-depth guide of Lost Eons as a whole, check out the All You Need to Know video over here.